Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to this episode of the Wisdom of, and this time it's the wisdom of Dr. Sean Gallagher. Sean is one of Australia's leading experts in the future of work, but is also an expert in generative AI. And where is that going to land us? You know, we live in a world that is superficial. Everyone's looking for tips, tricks, and hacks. And what's the shortcut and what's the pathway? And certainly technology and work will change. But also, what are some of the foundational pieces of wisdom that still apply? You know, the world is complex socially, economically, politically, commercially, and we need to dig deeper and really think about some of these things in the context of a wiser basis of conversation, if you like. And this really fascinates me. I'm looking forward to this episode because I'm probably like everybody else. AI has swept the world, technology is sweeping the world. What does that actually mean for humans and the future of work? And where does that come from? And Sean is the founder of Humanova. He's one of the leading experts, as I said, in the future of work, has real expertise in generative AI. He's published with Mervac and the Work Tech Academy, APEC endorsed. I'm not exactly sure what that means, Sean, but I'd like to find out. He's been cited by Fair Work Australia in terms of some of the work that he does and some of the things that they're doing. He's been a part of federal and state level legislation and how this plays out. Referenced by Richard Branson, so must have struck his interest somewhere, and is on the committee for the future of work, the future of work panel with ARI, the Australian Human Resources Institute. So there's a really broad perspective, and I'm looking forward to the conversation, Sean. There's much more I could say about you, but I think I'd love to get into the conversation. And I take off your LinkedIn profile. I prepare leaders, I train companies, and I empower people. And I love that because leadership, everything rises and falls on leadership, to quote, John Maxwell, right? And so I don't know that we've ever, we probably have back in the past when you and I weren't around, but it feels like we've never been in need for, greater need for great leadership as things seem to accelerate at the rate of change that we're seeing right now. We really need leaders to step up, right?
We do, and well, it's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the way I see the world and some of the experience that I bring. But certainly keen to explore many of these topics with you.
Sure. So, what inspired your interest in this first? Like, I'd love to get the origin story.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to see how people arrived at the life's work, if you like. What inspired you? What triggered the interest and the evolution of your thinking and how technology transforms things?
Well, if you look at my CV in any great depth, and for fear of boredom, I'll give you a brief summary. I started off in chemistry, so I've got a PhD in chemistry, and the work that I was doing back then was I started off doing osmium chemistry, which I won't go into great detail with your listeners today. But I had an opportunity about 3-4 months into my PhD to pivot and explore fullerenes. Now, fullerenes are a carbon-based molecule. Some of your listeners might know them as Buckminster fullerenes. They have a sort of a geodesic dome kind of geometry. And I was really fascinated by the opportunity to take my experimental techniques and expertise, but apply it in a different area. And that was really the spark for me in, sort of realizing my huge interest in exploring new frontiers. So going from osmium to carbon chemistry, you can imagine talking to your PhD supervisor if you're doing in history. It'd be like going from Greek history to modern Australian history, like significantly diverse. But my supervisors allowed me to do that, and it was a really successful PhD. But I didn't stay in science because while I was exploring new frontiers, and they were certainly very exciting and fascinating, it didn't have what I began to realize in hindsight, the impact that I wanted to get from the work that I was doing. And I have done a number of iterations of my career since then. I looked at how American universities were using Asia as a test bed to define new research and learning models. And from that, that sort of has now turned into the future of work. I've been in the future of workspace for about 10 years now. It probably started looking at Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution and the impact of digitalization on work. I've spent some time in cobotics. I've looked at the impact that technologies through a remote and hybrid working have had on future of work. And of course, as you mentioned in the intro, focusing on generative AI. And it is, again, about exploring those new frontiers. But what really excites me about the future of work is the impact that this work can have in a way that previously, well, if anyone wants to read my papers on Fuller Inns, they're more than welcome to. But it really is, I'm hoping, to be part of the huge societal change that's underfoot.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about, the transformation of work and what that would look like. And look, it would be easy to talk about just in the context of how technology or digitalization is transforming work, but you've also, you've talked through a range of things there when you're talking about the future of work. So I'd love just to open up in general and let you talk about how you see the transformation of work starting to play out, and you can pull in any of the threads that you'd like to pull in. I think it'd be great for people to hear a perspective.
So what I think, the future of work, when I started, so I got the opportunity about 7 or 8 years ago to lead the Center for the New Workforce at Swinburne University. And, while I'd sort of done a little bit of work in Industry 4.0, it wasn't specifically future of work focus. And so this opportunity came along and I thought, well, first of all, I've got to figure out, what does future of work actually mean? And because it means lots of things to different people, and that was 7 or 8 years ago. And now it's increasingly just a ubiquitous term that we throw around to talk about the future in some respects. So, but for me, I've always, given that I've, in some ways, my scientific background in chemistry, I often, from that sort of mindset or that way of thinking is looking at what actually happens at the molecular level and then the impact that actually then has at a systemic level. And so that's kind of the way in which I look at the future of work. What actually happens at the interaction between humans in that value creating process that work actually drives, and then what does that mean for the organization? And so when I talk about the future of work, I'm interested in the impact that technology and digital disruption, that those rapidly changing events that are occurring, and the impact that has on work itself. And so I'm not so much interested in the content of work, but much more about the process of work.
Sure.
And how does these rapidly changing technologies, how do they actually impact the work that we do? Because if I can, to me, if I step back and ask the question, the purpose of any business is to create value. And they create value through work, and which is why I think it's such an important area in which to focus. But I look at it from the mechanics, the structure, the processes of work, and how that's changing with tech.
Sure. And, the human condition needs to be productive. It's a part of the human psyche that we need to be able to, put our hands to some kind of work and produce things. And so work isn't just a societal thing in terms of value creation. It is a part of people feeling valuable, and so what are some of those impacts that you think might occur, or they may already be occurring in early stage and you're seeing them now as a result of these disruptive technologies, events and things like that? So what are some of the big impacts you're starting to see shift?
I think it's worthwhile going back to March 2020, and COVID lockdowns were just being implemented, not just here in Australia, but right
Yeah.
across the planet. And that was a fundamental and profound change to the way that we worked.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you know, there were so many shibboleths that were blown away by COVID, and one of which was the prime reason. If I'd asked your listeners in February 2020, what's the purpose of the office? Everyone would have said, well, that's where you go to do work, right?
Mm.
But COVID showed us that we didn't actually have to be in a physical workplace to do work. And so that change in mindset, it actually was like a lightning bolt
Mm.
for us in terms of, how we've always envisaged and conceptualized the structure of work, the process of work is being blown apart. And now that hybrid working has really taken off and settled into most organizations that involve knowledge work, we're starting to realize that there's some comparative advantages to working in the office versus working remotely. And one of the things that is becoming, as you're passing these different places of work, what's really being shone under the spotlight is the value of why we come to the office. Now, a lot of organizations, they say they're hybrid, but they don't actually do it very well. And part of that is that while they might have, well, 2 days a week you have remote and the other 3 days you come into the office. But people come into the office and they sit on Teams meetings, or or their colleagues aren't there. So we're actually missing the opportunity of what we actually learnt from COVID and remote, and also, but before COVID, the value of the office. And so it's about, as technology continues to disrupt work, it's forcing us to focus on the value of human interactions, particularly meaningful ones. And the office is, you take advantage of having a bunch of humans in the same room together, and the type of activities that should occur when you have that, when you have those people together with you. And in some respects, AI is going to be a continuation of that, in that it really is forcing us to focus on our human competitive advantage. And in some respects, I often say that organizations should still continue focusing on getting hybrid right, because that's actually going to set them up for AI. I'm very happy to unpack that if you like. But my fundamental thing in all of this, Simon, is, and for regardless of, be it the tech that has come before, be it Industry 4.0 or digitalization or generative AI or what comes next, is that as technology becomes more sophisticated, we have to become more human at work, and valuing the human contributions that we can bring as not just workers, but as humans in the people we employ.
Yeah. It's I'm about 80% of our clients are through North America, and so we're in a lot of conversations that have a lot of AI discussion in them, and we're across multiple industries, including technology. And there are some things that humans bring to the table that technology doesn't. Speed to context is still more of a human quality, but so is compassion and care and conscience. What's the right thing to do as opposed to the thing to do? There are still these human qualities. It was interesting when COVID hit. I spent a lot of time in the sales space. Sales leaders across the world, all of a sudden the road warriors that are spending 200 plus days a year on planes and, in cars going out and selling to people, all of a sudden had to do it through Zoom. And so everyone was selling through Zoom. And then kind of post-COVID, most sales executives are saying Zoom is a key part of our sales strategy now, and we can do it all on Zoom. So much more happens in the room when you're actually with a person. And if it's about the value exchange that you talk about, that is at the center of business, there's so much that is still unsaid when humans are interacting that you just can't get over Zoom. Zoom's fascinating, right? The first time you meet somebody that you've only known on Zoom, it's always a shock how tall or short they are because
Mm.
you have no relativity about that, you know. So there's so much that is unsaid. I'd love to unpack, you know, a bit more of that, as you said. So I'd be very happy for you to go a bit deeper into that, and let's go to AI kind of a little bit later, and let's just talk more generally how get the hybrid right to be able to make the great, you know, the most use of where technology might be able to help you. I think that's worth kind of digging into a bit more. You know, you said that still a lot of organizations are not getting the hybrid workplace right. So I'd be really happy if you to unpack that a bit further for us.
Yeah, with a hybrid, I don't, as you pointed out, I don't think that most organizations are getting hybrid right. And it's not that they don't see it as a problem, it's just no longer a front burner issue. There are so many other things. And they figured that they've done an okay enough job and that it doesn't warrant any further attention. But they're actually missing out on a huge opportunity here. Um, I'm, you know, with I actually think that Amazon has, you might know, the CEO of Amazon has ordered a complete return to office.
Mm.
I think that's a strategic mistake. And while there might be some people suggest that there might be reasons to force redundancies for those that don't want to come back to the office full time, that may or may not be true. We'll find out in time. But I actually think, as I said, it's a strategic mistake. First of all, in the sense that research shows that productivity is actually better when you have a couple of days at home and 3 days in the office. And, you know, why would you take a decision that is going to reduce the productivity of your organization? I'm not sure. But the strategic mistake is much more about alignment to the future.
Mm.
Now, when I'm currently working with several Victorian government departments on helping them optimize hybrid working arrangements. And it's quite simply, it comes down to structure and programming. Most organizations do the structure bit, you know, in terms of, you know, these are our anchor days in the office, so these are days you can work remotely. But then they don't program the right activities to fit within that structure. And as I said at the outset, you know, you get people coming into the office and they're ticked off thinking, well, I'm just sitting on Teams meetings all day. Why have I bothered to come in?
Yeah.
And so it's about programming the right activities. Now, if you do that right, if you set up hybrid right, that means the work you're doing when you're in the office is very human. And the work you do when you're remote is kind of more worker-like. It's BAU, it's routine, it's you know, sometimes very repetitive. That's the kind of work that's highly exposed to being automated by AI. So in some respects, if you haven't begun to pass the work that you do across an organization in a hybrid arrangement, you're not actually starting to separate out what work is going to be better targeted for AI versus not. And so that's the strategic mistake in not getting hybrid right, or enforcing a return to office. Because I actually see, you know, it might sound a little counterintuitive, but I sort of see a renaissance in the future of the office, in that we're actually going to be coming back to the office more, not because of any CEO mandates, about return to office because they're worried, you know, they might have a command and control leadership style, or they're worried about having, you know, millions of dollars of office space that are lying fallow. It's actually going to be because the work that we do remotely is going to significantly diminish because of AI. And we're going to have to be a lot more human in the future of AI, and the best place for that is in a physical workplace.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective, that the things that people can do remotely, you know, can and probably will eventually be replaced by not just AI, but other technologies as well. And I love there was just this, I mean, this bit of gold in what you were saying, that a lot of companies get the structure right. They set up the tech, COVID hit, and pretty quickly people were able to get people to work from home because of the technology and structures and teams. And we do our meetings on these days and everything else. But the programming of work, where you're going to get the greatest use of the human being actually being there present, and we spend so much time, in people's personal development about being present, the power of presence. And yet we seem to miss that might be important in terms of relationships and in terms of aspects of human work. Where does the human add the greatest value is going to become an interesting question. I mean, one of my questions was, how can organizations best balance human capability and the technological tools and innovations? And that's really what you've been talking about for the last few minutes. We're going leadership. So we led off by talking about how important leadership is in this kind of world. Leadership takes on a whole new dimension now, doesn't it, in terms of what do we need from leaders as this future of work unfolds, because none of us can predict it in its entirety. So how do you see leadership changing? What do you see, how do you see leadership needing to change, to deal with a future of work that might always be changing ahead of them, if you like? The opportunities just always just out there ahead of them. They need to keep moving towards them. I'd love to unpack your thinking around leadership in this context.
I think the key thing for certainly leadership is going to fundamentally change to what we've known previously. We're going from a very deterministic world in where you pull one lever and it gives you a particular outcome.
Yeah.
Things are much more dynamic and complex than they've ever been before. And particularly with when you throw AI into the mix, in the sense that it's going to increasingly do take over a lot of the work that humans have done traditionally. I think the key thing for leaders in terms of the leadership elements that they bring from an organizational perspective is having the right vision and having a North Star. So whatever their field or industry or the work that they do as an organization, what's their North Star? What's an immutable fact, if you like, that is only going to become further reinforced the more the change occurs? And so identifying that North Star, but then what's the vision for the organization to actually chart a course towards there? Strategy is still important, but having not even a 5-year strategy anymore it's kind of almost like a waste of time, because the world's going to be different in 5 months, let alone 5 years. So having your North Star plus your vision. But then leadership from a people perspective, I think, is also significantly going to change. I often talk about leadership is more, it's about empowering, engaging, being visible, and being vulnerable. And, in terms of empowering it, from a really practical kind of level, like delegating decision making as much as possible, and to, empower the entire team to solve a problem rather than just going to your 1 or 2 trusted lieutenants. But at the same time, ensuring that everyone has ownership of that outcome. This isn't just, it has to be, empowerment plus accountability, if you like. And that really, in a safe space where everyone is supported to succeed, is critical, as well as engaging, celebrating wins, as well as engaging with everyone right across the organization, celebrating, making sure that in a meeting that the youngest or newest person speaks first, so that you're telling everyone across the organization that everyone is valued and you're wanting to engage everyone. Being visible is also critical in leaders sharing their view of the world with their team and their subordinates at all times, talking to them about the challenges that they're facing, or the 2 to 3 things that they're working on. What are the priorities? So really being visible in the work that is occurring across the organization. And I think perhaps fourth, and most importantly, and to me, is actually being vulnerable. Psychological safety is going to be critical in a world where the future looks nothing like the present, let alone the past. And so recognizing that I don't have all of the answers, we're all going into this space. It's a lot of unknown unknowns. We need to ensure that we have a psychological safety, and fundamental to that is leaders' vulnerability, right? That they're prepared to say that they don't know what's going on, or they're prepared to talk about, maybe risks that they're wanting to take, but they're unsure about the outcome. But engaging and empowering everyone to be part of that journey, and to ensure that the psychological safety, where people aren't afraid to put forward ideas that can be challenged, but improved to amplify the learning of everyone. And fundamental is leadership vulnerability.
Yeah, I mean, it's intriguing. For years, I've been talking about, we manage things and we lead people, or more particularly, we manage the tangible and we lead the intangible. And that's a lot more time out from behind the desk. It's a lot more time in the intangible conversations that you don't necessarily know the outcome of as you head into the conversation. So vulnerability has to be a key to that. Otherwise, you would never enter into those intangible conversations. You would never ask the youngest, newest member of the team for their perspective. What if they talk about stuff I really don't know or understand? So I think it's we are in this very interesting shift in terms of where the future of work is going, but actually the future of leadership. And I loved your message at the start that at the heart of this, it's value creation. Work isn't a word that says hard labor. Work says this is how we actually create value. This is how we make a meaningful difference. So if we think about, let's just jump into AI for a little bit. And how you see that impacting. I know that you've made the comment that the number one rule of AI is, I think, a human ultimately does the final check. Everything gets checked by a human. But I'd love to unpack some of your thinking around generative AI, maybe some things for organizations to be mindful of, thoughtful about, careful about. How you see that organizations might be able to leverage this. It's an open opportunity for you to now lead us into the AI conversation in terms of the future of work and what impact that is having and will have as you see it.
I think AI is really the only game in town in terms of the impact that it's going to have, not just on organizations, but the economy and society. The question is, the only unknown question in some respects is when. And is it going to be an incredibly rapid change, or is it going to be something that we're going to be able to adjust to as it rolls out? There's been a number of people who have their hands on the wheel driving us into the AI future. And they've come out with some fairly astonishing essays and statements that they've made. Dario Amodei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, some of your listeners might know Anthropic through Claude and that AI chatbot. He put out an essay called Machines of Loving Grace. And he thinks that there is clearly a probability, it's not a certainty, that within 2 to 3 years, we could have what he calls powerful AI, which is the equivalent of AGI, and within 10 years, a profoundly transformed world. Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, has put out an essay called The Intelligent Age, and he sees artificial superintelligence being achieved within, in his words, a few thousand days. This is, an incredible change that is certainly underway. The question is when, and will all of that come to pass? We'll certainly find out. But what is critical today for leaders who are listening to this podcast, and for others in terms of how they think about their application at work, is that we need to start preparing now. whatever the future might be, there's no point. First of all, we need to think of AI as not being a technology. This is a transformative way in which we're going to completely change what work is. And it's almost like hiring an army of virtual co-workers to come into your organization. So stop thinking about it as a technology in the sense that often when we see a new tech that comes out, leaders will be, they don't want to be first adopters. They might be, a little bit further down, across the bell curve towards, oh, well, let's wait for the technology to mature and then we'll get something off the shelf. In my view, that's too late. And the reason being is that while it's not impossible to use a more advanced technology, what's fundamentally important for all organizations is behavioral change. This AI is not as I said, not like any other technology. It's not a special purpose technology which we use for a particular use case here or there. It's a general purpose technology. We can use it in everything. There is not a single task that you do in the day in which AI cannot help you. And that's the behavioral change that needs to occur. Every worker needs to begin to integrate AI into their workflow, into every single task, so that they are evolving with the technology, because the technology is going to improve. And as it improves, workers need to evolve. The organizations likewise need to evolve with the technology, so that when that mature technology does come out, the organizations are ready to integrate it within the work that they do, because they've changed the way in which they work and they understand intuitively how to create value using this technology, rather than something that pull off the shelf and I'm going to maybe throw that at my supply chain and fix 20% here or whatever. Of course, it can do that, but really the fundamental change needs to occur. Start today by integrating AI into people's workflows, and that only happens through behavioral change, because those futures that Dario Amodei, Sam Altman, and others are talking about, the only way that we're going to be able to succeed in whatever future emerges is if we start today, and to change our mindsets, to change our behaviors as to this technology.
Yeah. Look, the gap, when the internet became available, I'm obviously older, so I'm able to easily remember pre-internet, pre-mobile phone. And, if you didn't accommodate the internet, eventually the gap got too big to jump. But this is accelerating at a much faster rate. And so if you're in that school of thinking that says AI is dreadful and I don't want anything to do with it, the gap will be too big to jump when that big transformation actually occurs. And so much value is in the ambiguity. But if your ambiguity is in the space of things that everybody else already knows because they've been using it progressively over time, you are already a long way behind, because what you see as valuable in the ambiguous and discovering, everyone else already knew. And they've already moved on to the next phase, and what will the next kind of opportunities be that open. So you have to at least keep pace with where
Yeah, I'm working with several organizations and supporting their leaders in getting on top, getting ahead of the curve, if you like. And, both from helping them change their behaviors, helping them integrate AI into everyone's workflow. And, working with some organizations, they see this as a talent strategy, in the sense that they have ambitious growth targets, but they don't want to increase their headcount. And so AI is going to be the way to empower everyone to get more out of them. Working with other organizations that see this as an opportunity to change their revenue model, in going from selling volume products to a mass market to becoming much more mass customized. And so it changes the revenue that you can generate per individual customer. And so these organizations recognize that AI is going to change their business model. But the only way to do that is to integrate AI into the boring, into the mundane work that occurs. Certainly for the first phase of AI disruption in organizations, it's actually not going to be about throwing AI at those those special use cases here or there. It's actually going to come through making people more productive and efficient by taking out the majority of the mundane, repetitive work that they do. It's really, it sounds a little bit boring and a little bit unsexy because people see, oh, there's a fancy new technology, I'll throw it at my fancy problems. But actually, the benefit of AI is taking away the drudgery to allow workers to focus on those higher value kind of opportunities. I often say that your business is going to be disrupted, but you're not going to find out until you start integrate what it's going to become, until you integrate AI at the bottom level and start changing your organization from the bottom up.
Well, if you think about talent management, and talent management, talent acquisition, talent retention has been on the corporate conversation for a decade and a half now at least, and before that it was recruitment and it was called different things, but companies want talent at every level, including the administrative day-to-day functions. You want talented people doing that. I actually think of AI as another form of talent in the organization, and its talent depends on how you use it and how well you use it, because it is generative. It has a capacity to be as good as you make it and as good as you let it be at any level of task, including the mundane. It's another source of talent inside your organization. But you lent in a little bit on, and your scientific approach obviously brings an evidence base to the work that you do, and things like evidence-based engagement inside workplaces, and open up. I mean, we're going to need to be much more evidence-based in terms of decisions we're making, I'm guessing, and I'm assuming AI will actually allow us to be even better at that in terms of trolling through some analysis that we might not have otherwise done, dots that we might not have connected, and things like that. It feels like it goes hand in hand with the scientific method, the ability to be more evidence-based. I could be wrong about that, but I'm interested in unpacking this idea of this evidence-based approach to the future of work, and not just gut feel. I think it's going to go here. No, let's get some evidence behind this.
Mm-hmm. Part of the challenge with with AI is because it's not like any other technology in the sense that it's non-deterministic. You and I could put the same prompt into ChatGPT or Claude, and we'll get a different output. And so, but it also works differently for different people in the sense that you would use it in a way that is in line with your ability to work with the way you work and versus the way that I work. And so measuring specific outcomes at sort of the micro level is challenging because it's going to be different for everyone. Whereas the evidence is actually best done at a much larger sort of randomized control trial kind of a level, if you like, and that's where most of the studies have been done so far. So it's sort of an average of the benefit that individuals get over using this within the tasks that they do. But right across the board, study after study shows that the evidence is faster, higher, stronger. So workers using AI can complete a particular work task on average about 25 to 40% faster than without using AI. The quality is also much better in terms of the output, and they're also stronger in the sense that they can do a lot more volume of work over a period of time. So, and study that's from an evidence-based perspective in terms of what's going on. Now, I bring that in terms of the work that I do with organizations, making sure that so we'll soon have what I often do is looking for trends across the workforce here in Australia and at a macro level, but then take that down to the micro level. So will be coming out shortly. I've done a national survey of Australian knowledge workers, focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises across the country, 1,000 knowledge workers. I just got the data back and just going through that at the moment. But I then use that data to then help support the work that I do at the firm level. So having those national benchmarks, if you like, in terms of the use, experience, and uptake of AI within organizations is super helpful for me to understand, then applying that to bring it down to the firm level. And there's been some really interesting insights that I'm looking forward to sharing shortly.
Well, and I look forward to seeing that when that's done, because I think some of the numbers you just quoted before, 20 and 40% productivity improvements, and faster, better, stronger, I think you said, but they're inconceivable improvement numbers pre-AI. I mean, if you said, let's find a 20 to 40% productivity improvement in your workforce, people will, that's a crazy number, but they're almost normalized numbers now with what some of the AI applications can do. And there's the potential to lose your way in that and just start using it because it's there, as opposed to where's it going to give us the best and greatest use or benefit at an organizational level. I see this with companies all over the world that we deal with. It's almost a race to who's got the most AI apps, as opposed to who's creating the greatest value, who's seeing the greatest improvements and benefits in their organization because of how they're deploying it. It's a brave new world. It's a fascinating new world, and it's certainly going to land in an interesting place.
Just on that, if I can have a quick
Sure.
rejoinder, I think the key thing for organizations, for leaders to think about, and I want to change mindset. So my goal for every organization in terms of AI uptake is every worker, every task, every time, and in every team. And it's partly to change people's mindsets that it's not a special purpose technology, that I can actually use it in everything that I do. For some tasks, it works better than in others, but in a few weeks' time, that may not be the case. It's rapidly evolving, and the only way that I'm going to know whether it's going to be beneficial and how to use it and to get the best out of it is to integrate it into everything I do. But then it's to scale it across organizations is at the team level. And as you say, that's actually about sharing learning experiences. It's about sharing outcomes. It's also about beginning to integrate AI into teamwork. So at the moment, AI is just really being realized at the individual level. Yeah. And we really don't talk about it. But to ensure that, to mitigate risk, to ensure that we're not just becoming lazy and accepting the AI's outcome, but also to learn from experiences, to understand different use cases in the work that a team particularly does. It really happens at the team level. And that's going to be, it's not the number of AI apps that you've got. It's actually going to be how well have you enabled teams to scale AI across your organization.
What an interesting thought to land on before I ask you some rapid fire questions, 2 or 3 of them, just so people can get to know you a bit more. But what an interesting thought to land on. It's not how many AI apps you have in your organization. It's how many teams you have using AI as a team inside your organization. What a fascinating metric for people to think about, for leaders to be thinking about. Sean, I got a couple of quick questions that I'm interested in hearing your responses to, because you are a researcher and a studier of patterns in the world and work. If you could time travel to any period in history and just be a fly on the wall and watch what was happening, where and when would you go and why?
I've thought about this a little bit, and I'm not sure that I'd actually want to travel anywhere, be it either in the past or the future, in the sense, I mean, it's not that those periods of time aren't interesting, but what excites me is about exploring new frontiers, right? And it doesn't matter what period you'd put me, be it the Middle Ages or be it in the year 2500 or now. I'd still be interested in exploring new frontiers. And I think that, relative to that period of time, whatever frontiers are there to be explored, would be incredibly fascinating. So I'm actually pretty happy not to travel anywhere, because it's either anywhere or everywhere, if that makes sense. And so happy to stay where I'm at.
And we might be in one of the most exciting times in history right now anyway. You know, what if you could have invented anything at all that has already been invented, what would you have loved to have been the kind of original thinker on?
It's in some respects, it's still being invented. And while I'm at the periphery, I'm certainly not at the core. And that is, AI labs are often leading this in some respects. They're at the forefront of inventing the future of society, the future of humanity, the future of meaning. And that's really something that not just fascinates, but it drives me to want to get closer to. And while, I'm a small fish in a small pond in Australia, having some thoughts on these kind of things, and maybe some minimal input and impact, but I'd love to be closer to to be at the nucleus, right at the core of inventing these futures.
Yeah, fantastic. Last quick thought: what unanswered problem or a question in the world would you love to be able to help create an answer for? You might have already partially answered it in the last response, but any particular problem or answer question you'd love to be able to solve?
Yeah, human consciousness. How does it come about? How does it arise? When did consciousness first become a thing in terms of the evolution of species, right? What does it actually mean? And sort of understanding that both from a neuroscience perspective, but also from an evolutionary perspective, I think would help us much better understand artificial intelligence and, seeing where that's going to take us.
Well, we've traveled a long way from chemistry, through to human consciousness. Sean, I want to thank you for giving us this time. My challenge to leaders, picking up on what Sean's shared with us today is, firstly, we live in a world of leadership vulnerability, maybe being one of the most potent dimensions of leadership that we're going to need going forward. We are on the cusp, perhaps in thousands of days, of the greatest transformation in humankind that any of us will remember, and certainly in the world of work. Work is this place where value is created, and the challenge for organizations now is to think about how do you get the greatest value from the humanness of the people inside your organization, and then use the changing technologies for other aspects of value creation in the organization that are more mundane, more repeatable, but also then elevate to teams. And if we think about AI, I loved the thought of and you might have to remind me of the exact words, Sean, so I don't misquote you, but anyone, anytime, any task, any team. Was that correct? Was that the four?
Every worker, every task, every time, and in every team.
I know you said it much better. And I think that's a great place to land. That's the challenges for leaders today. How do we think about the world of work and these transformational events and technologies in that context? So Sean, thank you so much for giving us this time and sharing your insights and wisdom around the future of work. And I'm sure it's just going to keep evolving. So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Frederick.